Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another episode of 365 Days of Gaming. I really appreciate you taking our time to check out this episode. Feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Greatly appreciate it in advance. Now, for a lot of people who are my age and started gaming back when I did, if you ask them their first Legend of Zelda game, they usually tell you the original one or the second one, Link's Adventure. Now, I remember playing Link's Adventure, and I also remember the cartridge being gold, but that's really about it. But I really started my Zelda journey with the Gameboy version, Link's Awakening. Now, being that this was my first foray into the Legend of Zelda series, I had nothing as far as expectations. I had no expectations set. And even without having any expectations, I could tell as soon as I started playing this game, oh yeah, this is a good game. Like there are things about this game that just seem better than my average Game Boy game. You know, that's the Nintendo level of quality, you know, even on the handhelds back then, it was always just a step above what you were getting from your average game. A lot of Game Boy games, they were ports of existing console games like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, just to give you an example. You know, both of those are fighting games, but still, you know, Tecmo Bowl and things like that. Like it was, you know, the game has a console version, and if you don't have the console or if you have the handheld, you can get a handheld version of that game, but beware, it's going to be downgraded. And even when I saw the Legend of Zelda for the NES, I'm like, I think the Game Boy game is probably a step up in quality, just because it's, you know, it's more visually vibrant, even though it's on the Game Boy. If you got the Super Game Boy, you definitely know what I mean. But just overall, you could tell that these are just really, really good games. And I just remember, like, you know, this game has so much going on in a way that not most Game Boy games had. You know, just the mini games that were involved. You know, a lot of Game Boy games were more similar to NES games, and Link's Awakening feels like Link to the Past. You know, it has that level of presentation, that level of variety, and just different areas. And obviously it's nowhere near as big as, you know, Legend of Zelda Link to the Past, but there is just so many good things about the way the story is presented. I like the fact that the owl comes up, you know, just to let you know you're on the right track. If you don't know which way you should be going, just try to go find the next time the owl shows up. Just keep going in one direction until you see him, and that's like, oh, okay. You know, it kind of keeps you, it's like your compass almost, right? It keeps you on the right path. But there's still enough challenging elements to this game, like me trying to figure out how to get, you know, old boy turned back into what looks like to be a Mario clone. But anyway, you know, he's turned into the raccoon, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with this mushroom. I can't quite figure it out. Then I realize, oh no, I haven't gone far enough. And I go visit the Wicked Witch, and she turns it into the magic powder, which you have to use in several different times throughout the game. But then, you know, there's always a way to kind of figure out your next destination. Very similar to Link to the Past, right? Where you can always look at the map and kind of figure out where you haven't been, or where you kind of were going one direction and got stopped, just in case you forget where you're going. And as always, any of the Game Boy games, you'll probably notice that they all have something in common besides usually being a first party game, is they usually have some sort of save function. So like for me, one of the things I didn't like about a lot of the handheld games were they treated themselves like console games, but again, like the NES, where there wasn't save files. And once we got to the point of having save files, I'm a fan of, you can't go back. And so some Game Boy games, you got to try to play through in one sitting. Well, the problem with that is, unless you had the AC adapter, those batteries are going to die, and probably much faster than you think, because you probably stole them out of the remote. And, you know, batteries aren't just easily accessible for you when you are 7, 8 years old. But anywho, I always appreciated them having the save files, and, you know, that's obviously a staple of the Legend of Zelda games. But, you know, with the Game Boy games, it was not something that I was used to based on all the other Game Boy games I had at the time. And then the story is, you know, it's a Legend of Zelda game. It's, you know, there's some evil thing going on, and our hero has to figure out what to do. And, you know, he just, by happenstance, he lands on this island, and they are in need of waking up the windfish. So that's going to be your job. You got to collect all the different instruments. And, you know, the way the pace of the game, I always like the dungeons are obviously going to be great. It's Legend of Zelda, so you don't have to worry about that there. Some of the items that you get, you know, like the feathers so that you can jump, I always thought was just a really, really neat way to do that. And they always do this thing. Nintendo has this way of always showing you things like you get the feather and all of a sudden you got to fight a boss where the only way you can really beat him is by jumping, right? That's such a Nintendo thing, but it's also just really, really, really good design. And then even as early as the beginning of the game in the first dungeon, you have the callbacks to Mario, like all of those little, all those little head nods and those wink moments that they do with Nintendo games is what makes them so special. And I felt like this game was definitely of that caliber. And, it holds a special place in my heart, being the first Legend of Zelda game that I played and beat. And so, I wanted to give it that shout out, give it that kudos. That's what we're here for with this series. And I hope that if you haven't played this game, but you are a Legend of Zelda fan, there is a remake for the Switch that you can play, which I think is a fantastic remake. It's not one of those like the way they did the visuals for it, I think is very unique. It kept the spirit of the Game Boy while, bringing it into the next generation. So I definitely invite you to play that version if you haven't. But if you have access to the original version, I mean, you can't go wrong with it. That's the reason why I wanted to show you footage from the original, because this is the one I played. But yeah, there is an HD version that you can check out as well. So you have no excuse. You should play this game. If you like adventure games, if you like Legend of Zelda games, like you're wasting time, go play it. But if you have already played this game, let me know what you think of it. What's your favorite dungeon, your favorite item? What do you think it stacks up in comparison to some of the other Legend of Zelda games? I hold it in pretty high regard. It's a top fiver for me, but that's also based on, my own personal bias. But I'd like to hear your thoughts as always. So let me know. Appreciate you checking it out. Y'all have fun. Y'all be safe. Peace.